Yeah. And I see Patrick and Armand, and let's see, I've got you, Troy, and just looking at the people that have signed up or are attending. Welcome, everyone. If you can't, if you can hear, we appreciate that you are, that you are participating in this workshop. So we're going to start exactly at 10. But again, I just want to welcome everyone that has taken their time to listen to us. And I think it's going to be a great session, especially with Troy Wellman talking specifically about starting a business or getting into the career. So again, welcome. We're going to wait a little longer. So if you have any last minute friends you think would benefit from this, go ahead and let them know. They have to register too. Kenny, is it still available where people can sign up even though it's 9:57?
I think it's available until 10 o'clock. We may have set it at 9. If there are some folks that are interested, I can probably send you over the specific Zoom link to get you in.
Okay.
So if there are any folks here that want.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Because again, this is going to, we are going to be recording this and sharing it on our North Texas UAS and Integration Committee. It's actually the website. I'm probably not saying that right, Kenny. What is the website called?
Yeah, so it's the North Texas UAS Task Force website. So we have a web page kind of on the homepage. It's kind of dedicated to the workshops, since that's kind of our main thing that we're focused on now. And then for folks on the call, you'll see a tab that kind of talks more about the task force. But the website to visit is www.northtexasuas.com. And so you'll see information on registration for future workshops, and then you'll see links for past workshops. Like, for example, we have our December recording up there right now.
Right. And keep in mind that's great, because you can reference it later on, and even though if some people have missed the workshop or you're attending and you think, gosh, I wish so-and-so would have tuned in. Well, the benefit of that is getting onto the website, and the pre-recorded workshop is going to be on there, so you can benefit from that. So just know that if again you're attending today and you believe that this will benefit somebody else, they can get on our website. I think last time the December one, which was on 107, preparing for your 107 and reoccurrent, that's on right now. And that's a great benefit that I think the workshop really, Paul Duty was our guest speaker, and he was very thorough when it comes to the material that's going to be covered. I think it was a really good session. So know that you guys can go back and listen to the one we had before. And then again, today's workshop is going to be recorded. And I think, Kenny, it took about 3 days or a week to get that on the website? Yep.
So now that we're kind of more in the motions of these virtual workshops, and we're kind of familiar with the process and everything, it should be a little quicker. So I'm thinking we'll probably have the link to the video by Monday, Tuesday, and then we can upload it Wednesday, Thursday. So just keep an eye out towards the middle or towards the end of next week.
Right. Well, it's 10 o'clock, so I want to go ahead and start, because I promised we would start early. Again, welcome to our actually second virtual Know Before You Fly Your Drone workshop that is sponsored by the UAS Safety and Integration Committee. I want to thank our sponsors, just to let everyone know we are still looking for sponsors, and it's a great way of supporting the programs, the workshops, but we also share and have links. Anyone that sponsors our workshops, we will actually put their logo and a link on the website so that they know that you're associated with a program like this. So again, I just want to welcome you. We're going to actually have it a little longer this time. We had it from 10 to about 11:30 last time, and we had so many comments that it was just too short, and that we want to give an opportunity to have the presenters do cover great material, but then we also want to have a time for Q&A. And if you do have any questions, please put it in the chat, and I'll read them to the presenters today. I do want to kind of mention real quickly our sponsors so far. Chariot is a solution and service drone service. So they've been part of our UAS Safety and Integration Committee. His name is Harold, and it's a great company. Then LessPen, they're wonderful. They're actually a Canadian company, but they have invented, I wish I had one of my pens. They actually invented a pen to clean your drone camera. So like when you're out in the field and you get a little dust or whatever, it is an amazing little tool that everyone should have. And then Women in Drones, this is one of our presenters, Sharon Rossmark, and she has some really great ideas. But the big thing is it's about networking and working together, not just a woman, but the industry itself. Fox Fury, another great sponsor. Fox Fury, actually, now that we are going to possibly have the ability to fly at night, they're the #1 supplier of drone lights. So if you want to fly at night, Fox Fury has some wonderful products, lighting products that are very bright, but they also have blinking lights, which is one of the things that you guys are going to need is blinking lights if you're going to be flying at night, and also a spotlight. Then, of course, we have AUVSI, Lone Star Chapter, Adrian Doko. He actually has been an amazing president, networking and getting that information out. He has a Facebook that he's invited anyone that's attending today. If you want to be a part or see what's going on with our local chapter, please tune in. So he's available. Then Drones Plus, their office is actually their store is in Plano, and they not only sell drones, but they repair them. And so when, unfortunately, I think everyone crashes once in a while, that's a great company, great store that you can go to and get it fixed. You don't have to send it out to China if you have a DJI. But Drone Plus doesn't just do DJI, just FYI. They work on many different drones and manufacturers. And then, of course, we've got Elm, that's with Evan Morelli, and he's also a drone pilot, but he also offers solutions and services. So if you have a need for a drone, you can contact Evan. He also is very, very well versed, and you'll see it when he has his session today, really well versed on rules and regulations and resources. Then Gleim, they were the ones that presented last in December when we had our workshop, and they're an aviation school, and they have some amazing materials. So when you are trying to prepare for your 107 or reoccurrent, they have an amazing curriculum so that you are prepared and you know exactly what's going to be on the test. Then GM6 is our main speaker today, Troy William, and I'm about to introduce him. He specializes in 3D mapping and such. He was a police officer, and now he owns his own drone company, GM6. So he's wonderful. But I mean, you know, we'll talk a little bit about him. I want to introduce him now. Again, welcome everyone that is here to listen on how to start a career or start a business in the drone industry. So let's start with Troy Wilman. He is a certified FAA Part 107 pilot. He began working in unmanned aerial systems in 2016, and when he founded GM6 Solutions, he's mapped over 100 miles of pipeline and thousands of acres of land. But one of the things I wanted to tell you about Troy is that his family, he himself and his family are very strong in building businesses. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted him here today, specifically talking about starting a business and a career in the drone industry. So welcome, Troy. Thank you so much. Oh, one other thing is he was a police officer, and now he has his own business. So he's got a very well-rounded background to be the main speaker today. So Troy, I'm going to let you go ahead and start. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Let me get this turned back on. Oh, there we go. All right. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm glad you talked about those sponsors, because I didn't realize that some of them were there that did some of the things that they do, like the lights, Fox Fury. I was thinking, man, I could definitely, I've got a couple of projects I can use some of that stuff with. So, all right, so let me share my screen and then we'll get started. Can everyone hear me? All right.
We can hear you just fine. Thank you, Troy.
Okay. All right. So as Maggie mentioned, I'm a former police officer. I worked in law enforcement almost 20 years. And how do I make sure I share this right? I don't want to turn one of you guys off. There we go. So anyway, is that right? We got it? All right.
Yeah, got your
So-
screen. Good.
So as part of the time that I was in law enforcement, I did emergency management, and because of emergency management, it kind of had given me an early perspective on what I now do with drones. Of course, I didn't foresee that coming, but we had to remap the county for 911 reasons to be able to, give the ability to 911 for maps to populate when somebody called, so that if first responder didn't know where to go exactly, they would have, a perfectly drawn out map to get there. So anyway, because of that, when drones became popular or became, affordable, I kind of saw an opportunity to get into, something different. And before I had retired, we were using drones to kind of assist in our investigations. But of course, at the time, all we were doing was using the drones to fly back on the backside of a property. I did I'd say the last 4 years of my career, I investigated animal cruelty, and I investigated cases all over the state. So there was a lot of times when a drone was a perfect tool to be able to see some things. And back then there wasn't any rules. So flying, almost anywhere, it didn't even have anywhere near the consequences it has now. So one thing led to another. I was in Austin working for the state my last year, and I had kind of decided I'd had enough. I was ready for a change. So that's when I decided, well, this drone stuff seems to be pretty interesting, that I think it might catch on. So kind of blindly, I jumped in and started a business. Of course, as Maggie mentioned, my family is entrepreneurs. And so I thought, watching my dad have a construction company, he's an engineer. I thought, man, he did it, I can do it. This, no big deal. Here we are, what is this, 4 years later, almost 5 years later now. I found out that it wasn't anywhere near as easy as he made it seem. And so when Maggie asked me if I could speak on this, I thought, well, I could certainly speak on what I did wrong. I can't necessarily speak on the perspective of Mark Cuban or people on their level, or even anywhere near that, right? But because of my experience in this industry, my knowledge of this industry is definitely a lot more than just business in general. So with that, I'll kind of get started, and we'll go over some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. As soon as it changes. There we go. Okay, this seemed to be a little bit of a lag, sorry.
No, it looks good. Thank you.
All right, so the topics that I want to cover is bootstrap versus funding, the pros and cons of self-employment, choosing a niche or niche, and then collaboration. And so let me start with, what is bootstrap? And most of you have probably heard of this term, maybe not. So bootstrapping is building a company from the ground up, and when you're using your own cash, your own capital, anything that you can sell. So it's basically just pulling up, tightening up the bootstraps, and figuring it out as you go, and kind of hoping for the best. And so when I think of bootstrapping, I found, you know, this picture, and it to me, it kind of sums up how I see it, you know, because this is kind of chaotic. And, you know, you've got, you know, people over here yelling and, you know, money coming out of your boots, which is obviously not true, because I wish it came out of my boots. I'd be real happy about that. But anyway, the point is that, you know, like it says, it's not always about people giving you money, but about being creative. And it's about, you know, being able to find ways to bring in new clients. It's about finding ways to save money. And of course, it all revolves around money. But the basic concept of it is start it with what you have, and like you're at a mad dash for the finish line. Except in bootstrapping, the finish line is, you know, it's like a light at the end of the tunnel. You can always see that light, but you want to get to it as fast as possible, because the goal is to start making a profit before you run out of money. So typically, you know, there's an industry standard of what people think it means when you talk about funding, you know. And so what I've kind of, you know, put this deal over here, because just from being in this industry, what I've heard people, you know, that don't have funding kind of look at it like it's free money. You know, it's kind of like you get a good investor and you have a personal bank or unlimited resources. And, you know, that's just the perspective that I've heard. But did this banner just pop up?
Yes, I think we may have lost your slides, Troy.
That's weird. Okay. So would I share screen again?
Yes.
There we go. Okay. All right. Is that back?
Yep, you're back.
Okay. Do I have the right screen sharing? I can't see mine. Okay.
You've got the funding, and on the right, you've got investors, free money, personal banking,
Yeah.
and unlimited resources.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Mhm.
So here we go. You see my laser now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, these items over here were kind of my impression, or the things that I've heard people say since being in this industry. And then over here, this is the kind of the pros and cons, you will, of what I think would be considered the industry standard. If you ask people that are consultants for business startups, and I mean specifically they consult for how to start a business, not specifically for a specific type or certain type of business. So, you know, you've got on the, I guess, the pro side, you have more, you know, if you get funding, you have more resources, faster growth, and, you know, the ability to survive in a competitive market. And then, you know, your negatives would be rigid timelines, less ability to pivot to do the things that you want to do or think you should do, need to do, and then less financial discipline. So just to keep in mind, you know, this is what I would say is probably what the average or common belief is between people that do this kind of thing for a living. My experience is a little different, and so when it comes to this industry, from what I've seen, you know, the reality of it is that this area over here, I would mark this out, because I've seen companies that are well funded, and when I say well funded, I mean anywhere from a few $100,000 to several $1 million go out of business, and some not go out of business because they were able to get even more funding. And you know, I've seen companies that have probably even close to 100 million in investor money just burn through it. And you know, for me, there's a good reason that both funding and Bootstrap have their advantages and disadvantages, but I would say the biggest disadvantage to funding would be this part. So less financial discipline. And I don't know if it's because of the mentality that you get when you get that funding, or if it's specifically the people, but I've seen it because I have done a lot of consulting since being in this business. And because of my experience in mapping, I've had companies that would ask me to do consulting for anything dealing with mapping or even processing the data. And so I think that's kind of given me the opportunity to work with not just different companies, but people in different areas. So I've got clients, I've got a client in Saudi Arabia. I've got a client that's here in the US, but the job is in Africa. And then, one of my first clients that I did consulting for was here in Texas, and I actually would physically go into their office a few times a week. And just, I think part of the problem that I see in this industry is that because it's so new and there's so many opportunities, that there's people that are jumping into the market not knowing, I guess, enough about the market. And I don't think like any of us who are talking here today, I don't think any of us can say, yeah, we jumped into it knowing exactly what we were doing when it comes to the actual industry. Now, business, some people knew a little bit more than others, but there's just a certain amount of time that it takes to learn certain things, certain aspects about this industry. So I think for companies that are funded, I think they kind of are crippled a little bit with the not having to learn some of this stuff, but being able to outsource it and think of it as just a quick fix to a bigger problem. So next, I want to kind of cover the pros and cons of self-employment. And so really, and it's pros and cons of self-employment, but it really is kind of, I'm going to talk about, the difference between working for yourself or working for another company. So when I talk about, so the pros and cons, so to me, some of the pros that I've come across, or I've kind of determined is that when, you can potentially, doing this for yourself, you can potentially make more money than if you were working for someone else. Obviously, as it says there, one of the reasons is because when you control the budget, you control the bonus. Of course, as long as the money is there. I think the national statistics show that, the first 5 years are the most crucial in your business in a startup. And, I guess it could be said, and statistically, I've seen this, but I don't remember if it was on an SBA site, but, and it's not necessarily true, but if they say if you make it 5 years, then you can consider yourself not a startup anymore, but also you're probably going to make it. But I think the likelihood is that you're going to make it if you make it that long. Of course, COVID, I think that's done a lot for a lot of companies, and even specifically in this industry, there's some companies that you could say they're recession proof, which is, I don't think it's true in anything, but a good example of that is there are companies that do inspections of power lines. Regardless of what the economy is like, power lines still have to be inspected, and it's still cheaper to do it with a drone. So anyway, that kind of thing, you know, gives the opportunity to make money even when some industries are not making money. So then, you know, another pro, of course, is that you get to choose your schedule. You know, if it's, you know, the difference between asking your boss for time off or telling them. You know, I like to say, and this kind of hit me when I was doing some consulting for this company here in Texas. They had kind of told me, you know, hey, we want you to start coming in, you know, 5 days a week, and we want you to even consider moving your office into our office, where we'll give you a space. You can keep your, you know, your other clients, do what you're doing, and we just think it's going to be easier for us to do what we need to. And so I was thinking about it, and I thought, well, that sounds to me like I'm going to be an employee, but without the benefits. So I said, you know, the difference between contracting and or self-employment and you know, being an employee is that I can, as an employee of somebody, I can go in and say, hey, boss, I would kind of like to go on vacation in a couple of weeks. You know, we're planning this thing, blah, 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 right? As a contractor, you can go in and say, hey, Jim, yeah, we're heading to Colorado next week. We're gonna go skiing. So just to let you know, we're not gonna be around, but if you need anything, you know, give me a call. They can, you know, not like it, but that is a huge benefit, I think, to being self-employed. And I can't tell you how many times when I was in law enforcement, I said, hey, can I go on vacation? One time I was supposed to be in one of my relatives' weddings, and they said, no, sorry, we've got, you know, people are out already, and people are sick, and, you know, things going on. So I didn't get approved. So that, you know, to me, that was a huge headache. And just getting into my own business, I thought, man, just having this opportunity to have the freedom to do what I want to or need to is almost worth it on its own. So then I've come up with, you know, the third one is that you have more opportunities. And by that, you know, I put more opportunity too. And then you can really fill in the blanks. These are just a few that I have. You know, you can try different things in your own business. You can make a bigger impact. And that means in the industry, on people individually, on your family, just anything. You can take advantage of tax breaks. And on, you know, on that one, to me, that really could even go at the top of this list of pros and cons, because you can easily get into trouble by not saving money or taking care of your taxes the right way. And it's a huge, you know, for me anyway, it's huge because I always did taxes as an employee. And, you know, you don't have near the tax breaks. You don't have near the opportunities to use, you know, like for instance, I went out to lunch with a police officer here close to where I live, and we went specifically to talk about, you know, some of the stuff I do is train, and I had trained him and some other people on mapping for law enforcement. And we talked about business stuff. So, you know, I keep the receipt and I get to write that off. And that's not anything that most people don't know, but I'm just using that as an example because there's a lot of stuff that that isn't normal things you think of that you can use, and it really is a huge benefit to being self-employed. And so I come up to this last little item here. For me, growing personally and professionally, I never even thought of this one as a benefit until, you know, probably, until doing this, getting ready for this presentation. I started thinking about it, And man, I have grown in ways that I probably didn't think about before. You know, it's kind of, if anybody, you know, if you know, or if you have been in, you know, like if you, anybody has been in the military and you go away to, you know, Iraq or Afghanistan, you come back a different person. You've seen things, you've done things, you know, and you may be less, well, I don't say less friendly, but you come back a little bit more serious, right? Well, when I got into this business, I still had the mentality of a police officer. And if you don't know anybody doesn't know a cops personally, then you might look at them on the outside and think, you know, they're a bunch of serious. Some of them are kind of scary. But if you know them personally, then you know that, you know, cops at their core are really pretty immature. You know, we would tell, you know, bad jokes to each other. We would mess around with each other. Sometimes, you know, you might have a supervisor that sprays pepper spray on your door handle of your car so that when you get in, you rub your eyes and you like start burning, and, you know, and then they're laughing about it. I mean, you know, cops really are, when we're together, we're, you know, we're immature. And so coming into this, I was still really immature in a lot of ways. And so just going through this has, it's given me a whole nother perspective on how to deal with things, but it's just given me also a better, what would I say, a better outlook, or not a better perspective on people, you know, because being in law enforcement, you read people, but you're not usually there for anything positive. I mean, there's times, but, you know, people don't call you when they're having a good day and call, you know, 911, say, hey, I just want to talk and say, thank you for your, you know, your service, or you're doing a good job. So anyway, so this next slide I want to show, it really kind of sums up what I'm talking about. So when I was putting this together, I've met people all over the globe because of what I do. So I text a friend of mine that I met in this industry, and he has a startup in Florida. He's gone all over the country seeking funding. You know, he talked with venture capitalists and large investors, but you know, he was in the military, and so he was kind of a serious guy, but this has really changed him a lot. And it's kind of let him, going through this experience has really shown him and his family what he's made of. He didn't really know he had this in him, because he thought, you know, at times he said, I'm going to give up. You know, it's hard to raise money. You know, it's funny when you go ask somebody for $1 million and you have this great idea, but they don't see it. And so I asked him, I said, what would you say is one of the best benefits that you found since, you know, being in this business, or since being self-employed in general? And, you know, keep in mind that before, he was self-employed before this, but he kind of, he said drones kind of put him out of business because he was in the manned aircraft business. I don't think he did mapping, but he did something along the lines of dealing with, you know, not photogrammetry, but maybe LiDAR or something. But anyway, to be honest, I can't remember exactly. But so when, let's see, but yeah, so what he said was, you have no restrictions on freedom to create, or someone watching over you as you make, you know, as you make the mistakes that you learn and grow from. Said, I make mistakes often that I would be fired for at any company. I don't know what I'm doing. I learned so many lessons from the mistakes, and I'd never be able to grow at this rate from those lessons if I worked for someone else. And, you know, I put that in there as a quote. I don't think he was expecting me to quote him, but I thought, man, that's the perfect way to say this. Because the first time I did a big mapping job, I was not prepared for it at all. And I think it took me 6 months, and I call this job, this specific job, I call it my most successful failure, because in the end, I was not able to complete the job. It was mapping about 2 square miles, but the client wanted a giant 3D model for a land development. And 3D models are hard to make, but they're twice as hard to make as just a orthomosaic, which is what you would use. You know, it's like a Google map. If you use Google Maps, an orthomosaic is that, except it's from a drone, it's more high resolution. And so I failed at it because I didn't know what I was doing. And had I been working for anyone else, they would have fired me. Now, granted, in this industry, no one else would have, been able to do any better than I would. And in fact, the client wasn't mad. He looked high and low to find somebody that would even do the job. And in the end, he found a company that is one of these companies that was probably like a lot of the big ones, and they're still here, but they were funded with millions and millions of dollars. And it took them, I think he said they finally got it right in about 3 months. And so, it's bad to say, but that kind of put a smile on my face, because I thought, man, I'm not as behind as I thought I was. Because you feel horrible when you can't complete a job, and especially when it's a first big job. And of course the client was I can't even tell you, but I'll just say this, that the client that had hired me on this job, he was in an industry different from any of this, but he sold his business that he had built. He sold it for $900 million. And before I went to work for him, you look up, all this stuff on him, and you're thinking, wow, if I do a good job for this guy, he is definitely going to help out my business career, my company. And if I fail at it, well, that could be the end, right? But this guy, he was extremely kind and understood, but it taught me so much that I would never have learned before. And as a matter of fact, that job, the data from it, the pictures that I took, I want to say there was about 4,000 of them. And over the period of 6 months, I would go back and reshoot all these images. Just every time I went, it was a 1 to 2 day project, and I would go back. And so I had just thousands and thousands of images, and I would continue to process these images to make them into a 3D model. And even though, after the job was done, I wasn't going to get paid for it, but to me, it was like, I have to do this. I'm not going to fail. And so that job projected me into where I'm at today, which is not only do I fully, well, I won't say fully, but not only do I understand the process extremely well, and I don't want to say fully because I'm still learning, even today, I still learn things, but I have a huge, different, a huge perspective difference between what I was at the place I was at then and the place I'm at now. And so, without that failure, I couldn't have learned what I did. So, what is it? I just lost the name of it, but the kids, when they're learning crap. Anyway,
Are you talking about the learning curve?
Yeah, no, not the learning curve. The like the after school projects, the acronym. I can't believe I just forgot it. I should have made a note, but I never forget it. But anyway, there's an after school program. These kids are learning to do things by making mistakes. I keep wanting to say SCORM, but that's a learning management deal. Anyway, the goal with the way that they're teaching these kids is that they're letting them make mistakes. And that's one thing that I learned from just having my business. You know, I'm really hard on myself when I do stuff because I want to do it right. And so that tends to make it where I can be hard on someone else if they're working for me. Now I wouldn't go in, you know, yelling at them and you screwed up, you know, but I kind of want and expect, you know, people to do their best. And so anyway, I've learned that, you know, it's okay to make mistakes. And in fact, it's good to make mistakes because that's how we get better. This thing's blinking. Did I get cut off?
No, you're
Oh.
still on. We still have your quote. So if
Okay,
you
yeah, that's good.
next screen, that'd be great.
Yeah. So, all right. So anyway, now I'll get off of that high horse. But I talk about it a lot because I just can't express enough that how important it is to just to be okay with making mistakes. It's probably taken me about 3 years to, you know, say, yeah, this is fine. So next, let's talk about the not so pros, or, you know, the cons. So the first one is that, you know, everything costs money. When I worked for government, when I worked for the police department, if they sent me to a school out of town, they paid for my cost, my travel, my hotel, all of that. And it was, you know, to me, it was normal. I didn't think twice about it. Well, when this one really hit me the most, I had done a crime scene. I do some crime scene reconstruction using drones, and I had done a job for a county down by the border, and it was taking them quite a while to pay. And so at one point I had to tell the prosecutor, I said, hey, you know, I get that you don't quite have the same problems I have, and my problems are not your problems. But when it comes to paying my bills, you know, I pay for everything. I pay for the travel. And if you're not careful about how you handle your budgeting, that, you know, that can be an issue. So, you know, this one, again, this is one of the things that was, for me, it was an issue. When it comes to the grand scheme of things and having your business, you know, business consultants may not even, they'll definitely tell you you've got a plan, but they may not even say, you know, hey, you know, think about these little things. But it can be huge because you know, talk about insurance, you think about the replacement costs of equipment, and I've seen people operate with one drone, and that's extremely dangerous. I can't tell you how many I've lost. I think I've had probably about 4 crash on me since getting into this industry. And you know, sometimes it's at a really bad time. The timing for it can hurt you, and it hurts anyway because these things are not cheap. But you know, there's times when it's like, well, that really stinks, and it's not a huge hit to your pocketbook. But you just, you know, you have to think about that and plan for it, and then, you know, try to keep moving. So another one is that think of, you know, minimum wage. I don't remember working for minimum wage except, you know, maybe when I was in high school. And now I'm like, wow, I wish I made minimum wage sometimes, because you work so many hours when you work for yourself. You know, I think I easily worked 80 hours a week. I was telling Maggie earlier, you know, I was up till about 3 last night working on a project, and that's, I mean, it's not typical that I'm up till 3, but this last week or so I've been just trying to get a project done. And so, you know, I easily work 7 days a week. And although I have a drone service, company, or primarily my company is comprised of the service of providing some type of drone service, which in my case is mapping, but that mapping covers a lot of things. But even though I have that, I still am in the office more by far than I am in the field. Because for me, if I'm mapping a project, especially now that I know what I'm doing, I'll be in the field probably 10% and in the office the other 90. And so that's something that I try to tell people to understand. If you're getting into this business, don't do it just because you like to fly drones. That there's nothing wrong with that, but that is such a small part of having a business. Now, the other part of this con is that this whole thing is a huge risk. Owning your own business, and especially owning a business in the drone industry, because it's so new. But it's a risk any kind of business. So you just have to understand that going into it. And you don't want to look at it like, yeah, I get it, it's a risk, I can do this. Look at it serious and think of the consequences of that risk. What if, and then just write out your pros and cons list of what if. And what if I fail should be in there. Although I'll be honest, the term sink or swim has come up a lot of times since getting into this business. And honestly, for me, the term has been, I'm going to swim. I don't have a choice, because for me, sink, it's not an option. And I don't say that, kind of like, I'm going to make it, I'm going to do this. I mean, literally, I retired from law enforcement, and I did it at an earlier age than I could. I didn't finish my 20 years. So that means, my retirement won't be for a long time. And this field, because I've put so much time and effort into it, I know it really well. And so I don't have a choice. This is it. It's this, or, go work at a fast food place, or, somewhere that you're not required to have a specific skill that you had to spend a lot of time in training for. So anyway, the next one I put is, no matter how hard you plan, problems that you didn't plan for still occur. This one was kind of a big one to me. It goes along the lines of, your drone crashing, and there's a lot of reasons they crash, but which, we won't get into, but it's not always operator error, but a lot, if not most, can be attributed to maintenance. But there's other outside reasons. In my case, at least 2 of mine were my fault, because they were maintenance issues that, I didn't know, I didn't listen to, I should have maybe read those little safety booklets that come with the drones. But, getting into it, it's like my friend said, I don't know what I'm doing. And so at the time, it's kind of like, I had no clue that these little toys, had these batteries that could just quit on you. And, it goes back with everything. There's so much to learn that you can't imagine, what you can easily not think about when you're planning. So, but, when it comes to planning, just, remember not to panic. The challenges will be hard, but at times, or they'll be hard, at times, but try not to panic, because that's not going to help. So although you may not feel like it, I think that even though, this has kind of become a motto of mine, that I think that's desperation breeds ingenuity, but panic breeds failure. And so the reason I put this in here is because, you're bigger than the problem. So when and I speak on this because I panicked so many times early on. I had a $3,000 airplane that I had just bought for that job that I failed on, and I crashed it the first time I launched it on the job. I was sick. I think I didn't have the flu, but I was sick. It was the winter time, and I was like, I got to get this job done. So I was dizzy. I launched this plane, and it just takes off to the right and hits a tree. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just crashed a $3,000 plane. And by the way, that's cheap. $3,000 for a plane for mapping is cheap. But you know, in the end, I learned that don't panic, you know, but the desperation of having a business, and I bootstrapped it because I didn't know any different. But by doing it that way, that desperation created ingenuity in the way that I did things. And so by not panicking now, I have learned that when a drone goes down, and here's a perfect example. One day I had just launched a drone. I was testing it out, and it was one that I've built. And I can hear it. And I turn around because I'm looking at the computer because I wanted to monitor, you know, some of the readings that were coming out. And all of a sudden it got quiet. And I just remember thinking, well, crap, there goes another one. And of course I turn around and you don't see it, and I had to go look for it, and it crashed. But it was kind of like, well, that sucks. But you know what? I didn't panic, and it was okay. I went and picked it up, put it back together, and you know, not that day, of course, and you know, I survived. So, you know, they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, that sucks, but it's true. So, anyway, I'm gonna get off of that one too, but just keep in mind that if you haven't been in business before, you know, bad things happen, but you know, again, it's okay. So next I want to talk about if you're going to get into this industry, you know, think about what are you going to do. You know, this is like even though it's a new industry, it's like anything else. You know, it's still a business. So just like doctors and lawyers, you know, doctors and lawyers, they don't just heal people and you know, defend people in court. They have specialties. And so, you know, to me, it's, you got to think about, you know, what can you do well? What do you like to do? For me, when I started in this, I thought I can do mapping because I understand it from when I was, you know, doing emergency management. As it turns out, I was completely wrong, and it's completely different. But I didn't know that at the time. But it still came back to the, you know, what do you like to do? So I like to figure out problems. If I'm not solving a problem, I will get absolutely bored. And so the first half of my career I spent in patrol. And after, I don't know, after a few years, I remember driving, I don't think I was chasing somebody, but I was driving, you know, lights and sirens to a call. And I just remember thinking to myself, is this it? Is this all there is to this job? Because, you know, driving even 100 miles an hour, it just wasn't that fun. It didn't give me a rush. And you know, I got to serve some warrants with task force guys, you know, drug warrants, and you go in with them after they kick the door in, and you think, wow, that's going to be exciting. And you know, after a while, to me, that just wasn't fun. And everybody has their thing, right? It's what do you do that you like to do? So the second half of my career, I did investigations, and that's what I loved to do. I solve problems, and if I can solve a problem that's a little difficult, that makes my job, to me, that's fun. I like that. So to me, that it made sense to get into mapping. But you know, you think about doctors and lawyers, you know, so there's surgeons, there's hospitalists, there's family practice and law, you know, lawyers, there's civil, criminal lawyers, tax attorneys. So if you do what you like, and this is something I was told when I was, I think, a rookie cop, but if you do what you like, you'll never work. And I think that's held true for the most part. There's lots of days that I said, man, I'm so sick and tired of being in the office. I hate doing this stuff. But, you know, it comes back to the mindset that there's going to be difficult days, and by and large, if you like it, those days are going to be offset by the days that are great. But you find something that you like, and then the things that you don't like, you find a way to do those, in whether that means outsource them. Like, I don't do my own taxes. I hate numbers, and I'm not good at that. I want to make sure I don't screw that up. But you outsource, you know, what you can, or you know, even better in talking about this whole thing is finding a partner. If I think all of us here, we're all sole proprietors, I think, but finding a partner, and especially if you're going to get funding, you are going to need a partner, because most investors don't want to fund people that don't have a team. But you know, whether it's a partner that's you know, physically a partner in your business, or it's just a partner that's outsourced that does the things that you don't want to do, you know, you've got to find that middle ground so that you can find a way to get through the different things that you like and don't like. So anyway, this next slide I want to show is a little video. This is a crime scene reconstruction that I did. It was a criminal negligent homicide. The truck killed, you know, some people. It was oncoming traffic. And anyway, the long story short of it was that the reason that I'm showing this is because I got into mapping, and as I'm about to show after this, that when it comes to this industry and the different things you can do, where'd that? Oops, sorry. So when it comes to the different things that you do in this, mapping actually covers more than just making a you know, making a 3D model or an orthomosaic. Where is my, you know what? Now let's see. It was playing earlier, and now I can't get it to play.
Oh, this is your video, Troy?
Yeah, I tested it earlier.
Okay.
What am I doing wrong, Ernest?
Meanwhile, I mean, you were talking just quickly about making mistakes. I think the point might be is that networking and, you know, reaching out. And we're going to talk a little bit more with Sharon Rossmark about this, but you know, all the mistakes you made, the thing that you can do is talk to like-minded people that are in your industry, because they can, a lot of people are willing to share about mistakes and what they've done in the past. So you may not have to repeat them all, but you can learn from somebody else in the industry of what they're doing. All right, there you go. It started.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry about that.
You're welcome.
I had to turn off the laser pointer. So everything in this scene, except for that truck and that car, are created from photogrammetry, so from mapping with the drone. And I've actually made vehicles, but in this case, it was better just to make it. But so this is what I wanted to show. So this image right here was actually created from, I don't know, maybe 60 to 80 images that were taken from DPS. It was either a helicopter or an airplane. So when you're mapping with drones, the mapping pattern has to be in a grid. But these pictures were never taken to be used for that way, in that way. And so, you know, I've got kind of 2 points for showing this. One is that, you know, going through all the stuff that I went through before taught me how to make a map from images that were certainly not intended to be a map. And it was helpful because before I put this together, they didn't have anything to show all of it at one time, because by the time they called me, it was almost a year later. They wanted this for a trial. And, you know, this is obviously a unique perspective. Even as a retired, you know, cop now, they're not going to call me right after it happens. Hey, can you come take some pictures? You know, they called DPS, who was working it, and they flew over, but DPS didn't even think to take one big picture of it to get everything at one time. So in this industry, you know, which will bring me to the next slide. In this industry, there's all types of things that you can get into. You have to decide what you want to do, what you are willing to learn. But this is when I was putting my business plan together, I had found, you know, some other information. So this actually came from a company that you upload your data after flying a mapping program, and they stitch it together. But it showed the growth in the industry. My point to it is, if you look at the top, it says all except for real estate require some level of mapping. So because of my mapping background, or what I've learned over the last several years, I can and have been involved in all of these different fields. You know, surveying, obviously, because that's the primary. Even agriculture, though, you have to map the crops to look for crop health, and that's a whole other thing. But it's still a mapping. And so no matter what you do, even in inspections aren't in here, but even in inspections, there's a lot of mapping involved, because like I've mapped cell phone towers, and you'll make a 3D model of a cell phone tower in some cases, so they can use that to make measurements. So one thing I wanted to ask is if y'all are able to put in the notes, think of, if somebody can, or a few of you can type in there, one thing that you think of a drone can inspect. So, like, if you can give me an example of something you think of that, is a place that a drone could go, that a human can go, but there's some level of, danger or potential harm to get hurt or killed. So where's
John said electrical towers is a good example.
Yeah, perfect. So that's really, and that's really the point to this. So if this is, to me, this is the best part of this whole industry, is that if you think about, what could I do in this industry? Well, that's the key question right there. What can you do? You can do anything you can think of. Be creative, and you might just find a new niche. Because when I was in law enforcement, you can't think, what could I do as a cop that's a little different? Yeah, I could go do something that is not traditionally done, but can I do something that's not ever done? Probably not. And so it just opens the possibilities to a whole lot of things, not just making money, but being able to, kind of make your impact and do something that you enjoy doing, inspecting buildings, windows, solar farms, bridges.
Right. So Troy, just so this is a lot of input here: mines, pipelines, bridge inspections,
Perfect.
Electrical towers, wind turbine towers, building facades, roofing, bridge inspections inside a grain silo. So those are great examples of how, you can utilize the technology of drones in all of these industries. So thank you for the input, you guys, the viewers. Yeah,
perfect. And I can't say all of them. I think the grain silos I didn't even know about, but that the other ones I've well, I haven't mapped a bridge. I haven't inspected a bridge, but the other things I've even dealt with. And I used to think that when it came to making a 3D model, I used to think, well, yeah, you know, that's cool. I like making them. They're fun because they're hard to do and it's interesting, but does it really have a usefulness? You know, yeah, a company, in the case of cell towers, they can map the towers and they'll have a 3D model of their assets. But then I got asked to do it and we had to figure out how to do it and do it good and accurate and all that. And that's when I found out there's a huge usefulness in 3D models, because on cell towers specifically, there's parts on there from all these different cell phone companies, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint. They're responsible for putting their own equipment up there. And when they leave that tower or they hire a new contractor to replace parts on it, there's so many manufacturers of the different parts, they measure in different measurements, you know. So one thing we found out from that was that you have to know what those parts are, so in the manufacturers, so that you can then go order a replacement. And that was a huge savings to be able to map that and let the engineers figure that stuff out, so they didn't have to send people out and up those towers. And so it saves people from getting hurt, which saves insurance. You know, those companies pay a lot of money for workman's comp. So anyway.
Mm-hmm. So the one thing that I wanted to add to that, Troy, is, you know, and you mentioned this, but, you know, with the drone, you have, you can access the image a lot easier, and you can give them an image that they may not, you know, necessarily be able to get a hold of. And then, of course, diminished risk is another big thing that a drone can provide. The convenience in a lot of these cases, the job can be done in less time. And so those are all great factors when it comes to using the drones in these listed industries.
Right. Yeah. And I should have hit the button. You know, drones can survey, analyze, and inspect 10 times faster than humans. And so if you think about it, it just makes sense. So anyway, the point is also, you have to realize that there's a drone for that specific purpose. And there's drones that cross platforms and cover multiple, you know, like one of these drones may cover different industries. So that's something you have to consider, is the cost. What type of drone do I need? Especially like somebody said, wind turbines, those specifically need a drone that can handle wind, because those wind farms are built in areas that have to have a lot of wind. So anyway, let me, I guess, move on to.
Yeah, because we're at
the
11
last one.
o'clock, so let's
Yeah,
wrap
sorry
up.
about that.
No, that's okay. You're doing a wonderful job. Let's just kind of wrap up and make some points. I'm going to encourage the viewers today, right now, if you have a question specifically for Troy, go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll read it to him, okay?
Yeah, and this last one's real quick. Anyway, it's very simple. So collaboration. I was told early on, or asked early on by a client that I was working with, if I would be willing to, you know, collaborate with them. And so the reference he used was a food truck. And so it made sense to me. He says, if you've got a food truck, for instance, this guy sells cookies, and then, you know, you've got another truck where the guy sells drinks, you know, tropical drinks, milk, whatever, right? So one guy, he's got the best deal that, you know, he can buy, you know, the dough and the cookie stuff in the oven. He can buy it really cheap because that's his thing. And the other guy can buy drinks at wholesale. And so if they work together and they hit the same neighborhoods together at the same time, they can both benefit from each other. So don't always look at your competition as competition, because competition's good, but it also, you know, everybody knows this, it can hurt you. You don't want it to hurt you. So, you know, make it where it doesn't hurt you, make it benefit you. If somebody has some resources you don't have, find out how you can offer them something and say, okay, what can we do to both make money? So anyway, that's really it on my collaboration. And so that, you know, that kind of takes it to the end. And so if you do have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. There is one comment with Armand Christopher. He says, you can't use doctors and lawyers as a comparative. UAS are tools, just like photography, carpenters, hairdressers, truck drivers, etc., or other businesses using tools. You are either going to work for a big or small company or be an independent contractor flying. To plug into those growth by industries, you may need to have some knowledge or license related to that industry. So the point being is basically, you know, get in an industry that you know, and use that, you know, use drones as a tool to enhance whatever you know is a good suggestion. If that's a little different, or if you're asking a different question, Armand, let me know and I will present it to Troy. But is there anything that the viewers have that they specifically want to address to Troy? If not, we will move on soon. I don't see any. So just as a wrap up, Troy, can you just kind of wrap up all the points, you know, the takeaways that you really want the viewers to hear today?
Yeah. So I would say, you know, if at all possible, the best way in my mind would be to have a partner, but somebody that is equally interested in seriously working. Try to get some sort of funding, but not a lot, because if I had it in a perfect world, I'd have a funding from a person that is sincerely interested in what I'm doing, not just making money, but somebody that has that knowledge. And then realizing that you know, everybody says it's hard, but don't go in it with an attitude of, yeah, I get it's hard, I'm ready. Go into it with an attitude that it's going to be hard, and you want to move slowly, carefully, and try to plan as much as you can, but know that mistakes will happen. And because this industry is so new, that's the reason that I put doctors and lawyers in there. You can specialize, and if you try to do everything, you're not going to be real good at everything. And for me, I think it'll set yourself up for failure if you try to do videography and some sort of mapping, unless you have people that are good at all of it, because there's a lot to each one of those fields. I would not try videography or photography, because I'm just not near as good at it as I am with mapping.
So Troy, one of the question is, if you've never had a chance to operate a drone, is it possible to rent a drone to play around with before you make a buying decision?
Yes, it absolutely is, but I would even suggest going on Amazon and buying a cheap drone. They have them ranging from $50 to $200, preferably a $200 one with GPS on it, because that's going to be more like the commercial drones, and you can find those all day long.
Right. And also, you know, I wanted to suggest that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, you know, working in networking and joining clubs and organizations locally in your area. A lot of times there's going to be some fly time, and they're going to invite people out to come and fly. That's a great opportunity to come out, see the different drones, and see, you know, the operators there. And, you know, if you start showing up to these, once, especially when the COVID stops, but when you start showing up to these events, it will give you opportunities to fly before you really make a decision. And then another question, Troy, is what is your go-to drone for most of the mapping work that you do?
Well, that's interesting, and I hate to say this, but most of the time it's been a Phantom 4 Pro. But I made a drone, and I am getting that, where that I'm going to depend more and more on that, because it'll carry a Sony mirrorless camera, and there's a lot that goes into mapping, but it'll carry an actual camera. And so I think that'll be better, because I had a plane that when that plane went down permanently, this one will replace that.
Great. Well, I just want to let everyone know that we can continue asking some questions in the chat. And when we finish with our other two presenters, we can bring them up. But I wanted to thank you, Troy, so much for your insight on whether you're going to get in the industry by having your own company or getting in the industry with careers. You've got some options there. So thank you so much. And this is a great segue into our next presenter, which is Sharon Rossmark, Women of Drones. She is the CEO for Women in Drones, which is a great, quote, networking and support for each other. And I think this is a great way to go ahead and invite Sharon to join us now. And again, if you have any questions later on, we're going to have some Q&A for all of our presenters. So Sharon, are you there? I see Sharon. Are you there on your mic? Go ahead.
Yes, I am. I'm just trying to bring my screen up so I can get into.
Well, welcome and thank you again for sharing your insight.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if that changes over to the slideshow. Has it changed?
It is blank right now, but there we go. Looks
Okay.
great.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so you can see the full screen, or do you see my speaker's notes version?
I see, how you've got the speaker notes. Yes, it's
Okay, so let me just change that over.
And remember, viewers, put your questions in the chat and I'll be happy to share them after Sharon's presentation and Evan's presentation. Okay, go ahead.
Do I have full screen now?
Yes, full screen.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks, Troy, for your presentation. It's great to be a part of this session again. So today I want to share with you the growing opportunities in the drone industry. My colleague Troy just shared his perspectives about being an entrepreneur in the drone industry, and I want to take a few minutes to cover a few of the key ways of finding opportunities with the drone industry if you're interested in at least starting off as an employee, or if you're currently working in the industry and you're looking for new careers. To do that, let's just take a moment though to really talk about why this is a great time to come into the drone industry. That's because it is the fastest growing segment, a sector within aviation, and the projections are by the next few years over almost $130 billion in terms of the commercial growth. So that in itself is saying now is a great time to jump in. And drones, as many of you may already know, are being used in a variety of industries. In fact, let me just go to the next slide. And you can see here the various drone applications, and this is just a handful of them. But basically what this summary slide of the application says is that drones have rapidly emerged as a useful tool for addressing the needs of a business and assisting in humanitarian crises. So you see everything from whether it's wildlife assistance and surveillance to organ transplant delivery. It's a wide range. And so while testing has been ongoing in terms of package delivery, you may have heard about that in the news, what we're now seeing is that this wide range is creating career opportunities. And as Troy just said in his presentation, finding what you love and matching that with what you can become good at is, well, you'll never feel like you're working a day in your life. So I just want to tee that up as we move into this next section. So what does it take to find a career in the drone industry, and where do you start? Well, I can tell you that we have inquiries from both employers and from job seekers. And what you see on the screen are exactly that. Employers are asking us to help them find talent with experience and skills in specific areas. And job seekers are saying, what are the keys to landing a job in the industry? I'm new, where do I start? What do I need in terms of experience and background? So what I can tell you is that where employers are asking us about finding talent, I can tell you that the top 3 ways that they're finding talent is that they're getting a referral from someone, many times even a current employee. They're working with a trusted organization or an association within the industry. And they're also posting on a variety of sites, if not even their own employer sites. But I can tell you, it really just comes down to networking. And so from a job seeker standpoint, that networking leads me to whatever you take away from today, it is about networking, networking, and networking, because out of that will become, you will receive referrals and you will get referrals. It's not unusual for someone to say, hey, we're looking for somebody with this type of background. Who do you know? And you have to be prepared with an updated resume. And I can't say that enough, and we're going to come back to resumes in a little bit.
Hey, Sharon, there's a little bit of a background noise, a little bit. I don't know if that's something that you can control, but.
There's no one here but me, so. I'm
Okay.
not sure.
No,
Let's-
worry. It might be from Ernest. It might be from somebody else. So just make sure everyone's muted so we can hear Sharon's presentation.
Okay, thanks, Maggie. So again, from job seekers, they want to know what's the key, and I would say your takeaway from this, it's all about networking. So let me spend a few minutes talking about networking within the drone industry. And just to tee this up, you know, networking in the drone industry is not much different than quality networking in any other industry. And the key to successful networking is about developing quality relationships. It's not about the number of relationships. So having something to offer that is well crafted for others to understand what you're looking for. In other words, what is your ask of them? And have it in an elevator speech. Don't be prepared to try and download it all when you walk up to them. So let me spend a few minutes to talk about 3 organizations that I feel may be worth pursuing in terms of your interest in networking within the industry. So the first one is Drone Service Providers Alliance, a fairly new organization launched in 2020 by Vic Moss and Kenja Segura. They are highly respected drone pilots within the industry. They provide professional advocacy on behalf of drone pilots, and they primarily focus here in the United States. Their motto is to be a united voice for change. In other words, as they work with regulators, they want to be that positive voice, not the one that complains about what's wrong with the FAA regulations or what's wrong with the particular policy, but more or less what's needed for us to incorporate this regulation or the impact that a regulation will have. And that's a voice that had been missing previously from a drone pilot, small drone pilot standpoint. And so what I love about those guys is that they're strictly a volunteer-based organization, and they're there to be the voice representing professional drone pilots. They do have a membership fee that ranges from $5 a month for students to $20 a month for commercial pilots, and then they also have corporate memberships available. Another one, which many of you may have heard about, is AUVSI, Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. As their name says, they are an international organization. They've been around since the early 1970s. They have about 7,000 members, and they do host an annual industry conference called Exponential. And it's a great opportunity to meet with people from all over the world. I think they have memberships from about 60 countries, and they do represent the broader, what we call unmanned market rather than just the aerial side of it. So much larger organization. And I know many of your listeners or watchers today, viewers may be from Dallas. There is a local chapter there in Dallas. And I did see some of the chat earlier that you were referencing that. One that's not mentioned here on my slide, before I move to the next one, is meetups. Before the pandemic, there were a host of meetups all around the country. So hopefully when we move into a post-pandemic world, those will come back. And then the next organization, I could not leave this conversation without talking about women in drones. We were founded in 2017, and we're a global organization, and we primarily focus on promoting and highlighting women in the industry. We provide networking opportunities. We have a career center, educational programs, and drone flight services. And I want to emphasize that while we do promote the efforts and the existence of women in the industry, we're not exclusive of men. In fact, it's a running joke because our male membership has been growing, that the MEN in women mean that men are also welcome. So if there's any guys out there wondering that this conversation is only for women, that's definitely not the case. But what I will share with you is that since the pandemic started, we started offering virtual networking sessions. And just like every other organization in nearly every country in the world, we pivoted to move our networking from going to individual conferences where we would network with individuals to moving it online. And the frequency is now weekly. We have spotlight speakers, and then we have small group breakout sessions where we talk about best practices. We currently offer a session here in the United States, and because of the limitations on the time zone and due to international interests, we're now expanding that. And so starting next month, we'll have coffee connections here in the United States, live from the USA, and next month we'll be offering live from South Africa fireside chats, which helps us pick up another part of the globe in terms of that same format. Obviously the speakers may vary, but we already have some international listeners and viewers that participate, but this just gives us a chance to pick up more. I know we have quite a few members from Australia, and they say, oh, when you do it at 11 a.m. Chicago time, that's the middle of the night for them. So we've heard them and we're listening, and so we're going to add that additional time zone by moving it to the other side of the globe, or adding another side of the globe. But with that, I just want to give you a feel for the type of speakers that we have coming up. We've got Susan Min, who was our woman to watch for 2020 in the area of public safety. And she's actually there in Texas, Cedar Park, Texas, and she works for the Department of Homeland Security. Sonia Bechtek, who is the co-CEO of Robotics, and they were the recipient of our Global Ambassador Award for their work. And then Zipline, many of you all may have heard of them. They're actually going to do one of their live demonstrations on one of our Coffee Connects. I think it's the first Tuesday in February, where they're actually going to be showing us a tour demonstration of one of their medical supply warehouses where they store, and then where they actually launch the drones from. So those are some of the things that we do from a networking standpoint. Again, it's all about meeting people and connecting. And one of the things I have found through this process, particularly being a global organization, is the world is so much smaller, and you can better relate to what's going on the other side of the world because of it. So when it comes to networking, I also wanted to take a few minutes and talk about industry conferences. I've identified 4 here that I think would be great for you all to be aware of. If you're not familiar with the Energy Drone and Robotics Coalition, they actually are based out of Texas. They have a number of conferences throughout the year focused on the energy sector. So this is a great, following up on one of Troy's comments, this is a great conference where, because they focus on oil, gas, and the energy space, that if you're in that space, this is a great conference to attend for networking. And then you've got Interdrone and Commercial UAV, and both of those conferences focus on the commercial drone industry. And they have opportunities to network at their conferences, focused for business professionals to connect with manufacturers and suppliers. And then the last one on the screen is Airworks, and that's run by the largest drone manufacturer, which is DJI. And they also focus on the commercial market, including suppliers and vendors. So again, we try and attend all of these in any given year. With it being pandemic for the last year, we've gone to all 4 of them online. But once we get beyond that, I'm sure that you'll be able to select one, if not all of them, to attend. It's a great opportunity just to meet and connect with others in the industry, and that's going to be so invaluable, having those contacts once you start launching, particularly if you're going to launch your own business, as Troy talked about. So let me switch gears now and talk about career resources. What's available to you to help you either, again, jump into the industry and or pivot and make some changes if you're already in the industry. So one of the things I thought it would be important to talk about is seeking employment in the industry. What type of jobs are we seeing? What you see on the slide there are right now the top 5 job postings that we're finding on our career center and pretty much throughout the industry. And that's just because there's such a dire need for it. They're not in any particular order, but I can tell you that drone software engineers is growing and growing fast. So if you've got any young people in your life, or if you're a young person trying to decide what you want to study, becoming a software engineer is high demand. Obviously, it's important for you to really, again, follow what you love, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that there's not opportunities. If you don't want to be a pilot, you don't want to be an engineer, there certainly are opportunities for business development people or salespeople, and then education. And education is growing quickly because there's such a need for engineers and pilots. And what we're seeing is that more and more K through 12, schools are starting to introduce drones into the classroom. Community colleges are starting to offer associate's degree as well as workforce development programs, all focused on the drone industry. And then universities, we're starting to see an increased number of universities offer degrees in UAS, so unmanned aerial systems. So again, it's great opportunity, great time to come in. Now, however, that doesn't mean that if you're human resources or a marketing professional or a lawyer, there are opportunities and jobs in those fields also, or careers within the industry also. And the other one that we're hoping to see come back that we've seen drop off since the pandemic hit is internships. More and more companies right before the pandemic hit was planning on internships, and then obviously that had to scale back. Now, since many of our audience today are interested in being a drone pilot, or you may be a drone pilot and looking to really understand the full breadth of what you can make or what the opportunities are, what this slide is showing you that is that the salary range or your revenue range can vary greatly. And what's really driving that is your level of experience. As Troy talked about, there's any number of drone types that can be used for various specializing in what particular job or task that needs to be completed. And the more multi-copter experience you have, you will have more opportunities for jobs, but also more importantly is that specialty certification. Now we're also starting to see employers put specific requests on their job postings around number of hours. 50 seems to be the average number of hours that they're looking for, that you've had what we call stick time, so flight time. And that is usually demonstrated by having it documented. So having some type of documentation of your flight experience, but usually 50 hours is the minimum when they're looking for a pilot, and that may not necessarily be a lead pilot. They just may call it an experienced pilot. So something to keep in mind there. So moving on to the career center that we offer. So if you're thinking about pursuing a career in the industry, or if you're looking for a new opportunity, I want to talk about some of the resources that we have available. And I selected 5 primarily because these are the ones that are hot buttons for job seekers. Our Career Center does support both employers who are looking for employees and job seekers, but for today's purpose, I'm focusing in on the job seekers. The services offered within the Career Center are all free or complimentary for the job seekers. The range of services include either free resume review, which is always good to have a second set of eyes looking at it, or even tips on interviewing, as well as, most importantly, salary and negotiation. You don't always have to take that first offer. It's important for you to really get a feel for what is the range available so that you can make sure you're maximizing your skills, matching it with what they're looking for. And then tips. So when it comes to, what should you need to know about finding a job that's right for you, I can't emphasize enough the importance of researching your target companies. So many times people just start looking for companies and they just pick one and they apply. No. That's all I can tell you about that, is that you really need to research the company, look on LinkedIn and see how many people you may know that's already working at that company. If you got a referral from someone about a company that's hiring, talk to them about what are they looking for. Ask them about the culture. What's it like to work at that company? You want to make sure it's a good fit for you. Otherwise, you may decide to take the route that Troy did and become an entrepreneur. The other thing I would say is that make sure that you're mindful of your online career brand. Many employers have told us that they start with looking at your LinkedIn profile. And then, of course, they go to your other social media handles. So if your personal social media is not separated or not much different than your professional social media, you need to take a second look and clean that up and make sure that you represent what that company is looking for, both not only in terms of skill sets and experience, but then also your personal brand. Because when you're out in the field or when you're meeting with potential clients or even working in their environment, they want to make sure that you're a good fit for their organization. And then the other thing I would encourage you to do is either practice yourself by standing in front of a mirror, practicing interview questions, or work with a coach, or I should say, or work with a coach. Coaches can be invaluable, or if you know someone that can give you that critical, honest feedback, not give you what you want to hear, that would be important. And then the last bullet there about cultivating your network, that is so important, because sometimes just having someone place a very good word for you may give you a leg up on a competitor who may be also looking for an opportunity in the field or for the same job. And then as I close out, let me just cover with you a few sound bites around an opportunity to win of $100. We just launched Thursday of this week, so 2 days ago, a resume upload sweepstakes. And you may ask, what on earth is a resume upload sweepstakes? Well, it's exactly that. It's a chance to win a $100 American Express gift card. All you have to do is upload your resume into our Career Center portal, and you have until April 14th, actually says March 14th, I'm sorry, that's a typo. It's April 14th, as it said right here on this screen, April 14th, to submit that, submit your resume, and it's just gonna be a random draw. Our Career Center is ran by a third party, so they're intaking it, and then they will just do a random draw and give us the winning name on April 14th or thereabouts, actually probably April 15th or thereabouts. So with that, Maggie, I don't know if there's any questions, but you know, we're here if anyone has any, it needs any assistance with logging into the Career Center. Again, it's free for job seekers, and more than happy to take questions or, you know, hear someone else, hear from others post workshop. So thank you.
Right. Thank you, Sharon. That was very informative. And just so anyone that is asking, we're going to have some more questions after our next presentator is Evan Morelli. But we will share some links also on the network and the organizations that Sharon has mentioned. Again, I think your opportunities are fantastic, but to know what those opportunities are is by being members or being involved in networking with organizations, and also like the Career Connect. I think that's a great opportunity, and especially for an individual to put your resume on this for free is a wonderful service. So let's start with Evan Morelli. Again, his company is called Elm Aerial Services. He's also a drone pilot, a drone instructor, but he specifically, his company works specifically on solutions and services. So welcome, Evan. Thank you so much. And again, Evan is one of our repeat speakers along with Sharon Rossmark, and they address the topic of the workshop. So we appreciate everything you contribute, both Sharon and Evan. So Evan, again, welcome, and you're on.
Thanks, Maggie. So the first two presenters covered what you want to do to get into the industry, whether you want to be a entrepreneur or work for another company. But I hope at this point everybody's pretty interested. So how do we go from the interest to flying our first flight and the things that we need to think about while we're flying our first flight? Share my presentation. Okay, so we're going to take this stepwise from specifically going and navigating the different websites that are required to sign up. And this is provided you've already studied for the actual content, which there are many online different courses or free available material from the FAA, which you can study. So the first thing you want to do is you need to make you go to the FAA website and check your availability. So let's see if this will go over to that. No problems. Okay. Can y'all see the internet browser? Yes, no? Okay. So you go to the drone pilot and you can check your eligibility here. Be at least 16 years old, read, speak, write English, and then pass the knowledge exam. So it's very different from passing your initial exam versus your recurrent exam. And even the recurrent exam requirements have changed as of December of this last year. So those get updated. But once you've checked your availability, which you can do here at the FAA website, which is always the best place to go if you have questions, they post all their rules on here digitally. They're widely available. So if you ever have like a question, a specific question, cannot do something, this is a great place, a great resource to go check.
Evan, can you switch right now we're still at the step by step. Okay, now we're at step 1, the slide. Is that where you want to be?
I guess there is a pretty decent delay. Did y'all see the website, the web page?
It actually just gives you the website in yellow, but it's not the actual page.
Oh, okay, hold on, let's see. I'm just gonna do the screen share. That should work. There, can you all see the page now?
There, yes, that looks
Okay,
great.
sorry about that. So
No.
yeah, you can come here to the FAA and you can check your eligibility. The FAA website, it has a whole bunch of information, R1 107, that are, straight from the horse's mouth, good information. So in step 2, the next thing you need to do is you need to get your FT and your FAA tracking number from the IACRA website. And that's super important because it's essentially your ID number with regards to the FAA, and you'll be using it repeatedly when it comes to your initial test, getting your recurrent done, but also when it comes to registering your drones. So we'll go here. You can create a new account right here. I have my information already in, but you can register and create that account. Let's see if I log in, accept your terms of service, and then you'll have your dashboard here where you can start a new application. Now, once you've actually completed your initial test, you'll come in here and start your initial application. So what it'll have you do after you've created your your account is you'll have to go and create a PSI account. And the PSI account is, I suppose, the contractor that you use in order to find a test authorization site. Now, I know we're in pandemic, but you can go get your tests done in person now. And so what you'll do is you'll create an account and you'll navigate through there using your information of your location in order to find a testing center, and you'll book your appointment. Now, once you've done that and you've gone and taken your test, when you leave the testing site and you don't need to take anything with you, they will provide supplemental charts and everything that you're going to need to actually pass the test. What you can do then is you will get a document, and it looks something like this. It's the U.S. Department of Transportation Airman Knowledge Test Report. Now I'll have your name, your FTN that you established earlier through your ACRA account, and your score, exam date, all this good stuff. But the really important bit right here is the exam ID, because that's what you're going to need to put into the IACRA website through the FAA form 871013, which you can do manually, but when you do the application through the ICRA website, you're doing a digital form of that. So you don't need to do both forms for having your exam ID, and you process, and that's how you get your initial license. Now for your recurrent license, as of right now, there is not a way to submit your ID to get like a new recurrent license, but simply you need to have this exact paper on you while flying, because this shows that you have passed the exam and that your license is current, because the date on your license is your issue date. And yes, it says expiration, but if you have a past test on you, because the FAA hasn't set up an apparatus for getting out a new card, you need to have this specific paper on you. So you'll fill out this initial form for getting the license at the very beginning. So as I said, there are some new information that has happened since December 2020 about the recurrent exam, in that you don't have to go in to physically take the recurrent test specifically anymore, and it's free now. You actually go through the FAA and take their little course and take the recurrent test online for free. And it will also add some new information and questions, specifically because of the remote ruling that they have done. They are adding in some extra information to help make sure pilots understand how to navigate those different circumstances. So you'll have collision avoidance with the aircraft, limited depth perception, difficulty of perceiving reference points during night operations, night physiology. As you can see, mostly around doing night operations, because now we have a pathway to actually get relatively straightforward access to operating past civil twilight, which is a very specific definition of time when it comes to when you're operating. So from there, you'll go to the FAA drone zone. After you passed your test, you've submitted your license, you purchased your drone, it's great, we're going. Your drone comes in, you have to have labeling on top of the drone that shows its FAA number, similar to a tail number, but specifically for SUAVs, and have that attached to your license. So you come into your drone zone, you can log in, agree to the TOS, and then here's your dashboard where you have your total number of drones registered, total number of users. If you're an organization, you'll probably have more than one users. And then this is how you actually go and submit waivers or authorization requests, what have you. This is the form in which to do it. So you're going to create your document, put together all your information, and it even has a step-to-step guide on some of the things that you're going to need to have as far as information, but also a formatting help. So once you do that and you have your drone, there's not really a hard, fast rule on how you need to present it as far as what materials, but it's best to use something that's high contrast, it can be seen from a great distance, and it needs to be visible as much as possible. Okay, so once you have all that, okay, you've got your drone registered, you've had your registered your test, passed it, got your license, and you got your first client. Great, congratulations. So now when we're operating under 107, I'm going to walk you through how you go from you booked your first client and the objectives that you have for your flight, the considerations that you need to take into account before you go to the site, and then what you need to do once you're on site. And some of these are based on my experience through consulting, but also from just managing people, managing yourself in public, especially with something as exciting and controversial as drones, that you are a liaison to the drone industry when you're out flying. So how you conduct yourself will affect people's opinion, because some people already have a negative opinion of drones. Some people have a positive opinion. So what you do does matter. So the number one thing is when you're operating, the main consideration you have is keeping visual line of sight. Okay, and that can be done a number of different ways, but that is specifically so that you can avoid having a collision. So the aircraft must remain in line of sight of the PIC, which is the pilot in command, or the visual observer, so long as you have good communication with the visual observer. Now the PIC, the pilot in command, can act as their own visual observer, so you don't have to have an extra person guaranteed, but it does very much so help. You must have 3 nautical mile visibility in order to fly, so if you have less than that, it may be unsafe to fly. And so that's a visibility limitation that has to do with your pre-planning and checking the weather before you go out to make sure that the conditions are appropriate for you to conduct your operation. And so night flying as well may require navigation lighting, and that's coming in now that we have an ability to actually fly at night. There's certain regulations that are required as far as visibility, what kind of lights are where, so you can tell orientation, because there's 4 different criteria in order to remain within visual line of sight, which is attitude, altitude, orientation, and velocity. So you need to be able to tell those 4 things at all times in order to technically be visual line of sight and therefore conduct your operation. So your spatial restrictions are mainly to do with airspace, but additionally, you may not operate over persons. And this is something that gets kind of confusing to people that haven't done a lot of operations. Let's say you're working on a film crew and you're trying to film somebody that's running in a field, right, for their film. The person that you are filming is not the operational crew, which means you cannot fly over them. Your visual observer and your PIC, they can be flown over because they are part of the operational crew. But the subject matter, if it is a person, cannot be flown over without authorization or a waiver. So you can also operate under a covered structure unless you have authorization and inside from a stationary vehicle. So you can't sit inside your car and fly inside, and not because you can't keep line of sight effectively at all. So daylight operations only, but Now this is, we were getting an ability to work during the night or during civil twilight. You can look up online what civil twilight is for exactly where you are. And you can fly up to civil twilight, which is a morning civil twilight and an evening civil twilight. And that is the hard line on when you can actually fly. At all times, and another reason why visual line of sight is so important is you may be doing everything correctly, but you may have a manned aircraft that's not. Okay, that just because they are manned aircraft doesn't mean sometimes they don't go too low or fly too close to. Even though you have authorizations, you may be using an app like AirMap or something that's conducting your flight. You may even have your remote ID stuff set up, but people are going to be people and they're going to break the rules. You must always yield to manned aircraft no matter what, even if they are in the wrong. You have to yield to them. Now, their criteria is maximum ground speed of 100 miles per hour, maximum altitude of 400 feet above ground level or above the top of the object which you are flying. So if you're flying a cell tower, the top of a building or what have you, 3 miles visibility. Operating in B, C, D, E airspace are allowed, but you need authorization. Operation in Class G or uncontrolled airspace, you don't need authorization for it. But again, if you see manned aircraft there, you must still yield them. So your personnel restrictions. A person may not operate an aircraft if she has a reason to know of any physical or mental condition that would interfere with safe operation of small UAS. Okay, that's information such as you can't fly drunk, you can't fly on drugs, you can't fly if you're super duper sleep deprived. You know, you need to be in a good mental and physical state in order to conduct the operation, because that can affect your reflexes, that can affect your judgment, and that could most certainly affect your depth perception. You may think you're perfectly fine, you got plenty of clearance on the side of that building. Oop, you were wrong, and your drone either crashed and or you caused damage to the building. You may have 1 aircraft per pilot in command, no operations over moving aircraft, no operations from a moving vehicle unless the operation is over a sparsely populated area, which granted is a relatively ambiguous thing. No careless or reckless operation, and no carriage of hazardous materials. Okay, so those are going to be considerations when you are determining whether or not it is appropriate for you to actually conduct your mission. So because we're doing this for the North Central Texas Council of Governance, there are plenty of federal laws that regulate what we can and can't do. However, in the state of Texas, we also have some Texas-specific laws, and I've tried not to data dump too hard on this, but there's really no other good way to give this information, but they still apply to you in Texas, though they might not apply to you in another state. So these are specifically having to do with areas that are specific in Texas you cannot fly that are explicit. That doesn't necessarily mean you can fly them in other states, such as over correctional facility, during special events like a football game or what have you. It also shows that independent municipalities, when you are flying, if you go into a city that has a municipality like drone ban, they don't get to regulate that. That's not an individual municipality does not get to tell you that you cannot fly a drone, because that is federally regulated airspace and the state is backing that up. So, and also throughout the state, any state park, you can't operate it, just flat out. If it's a Texas state park, which are different from Army Corps of Engineer parks and federal parks, which you can also not fly in federal parks, you cannot fly in Texas state parks. So on-site considerations, you booked your client, you've thought everything through, you make sure that the flight is appropriate for your skill set and your equipment, and you get on site. One of the biggest things you want to look at right when you get on site, especially if it's an urban area, but even in some rural areas, is RF interference, because it can be the biggest inhibitor to your ability to conduct your flight. And it's very difficult to tell because it's technically invisible unless you see giant rebar sticking out of the ground. The metal objects cause interference. You need to be wary of underground rebar, especially with areas like we've seen in Chicago. Along their shoreline, they have these concrete sections all throughout the shoreline to help maintain the shore. It's all filled with rebar. and causes an enormous amount of interference, which severely limits our range and our ability to actually conduct the flight, which would be less than what is technically allowable in visual line of sight. So looking for metal the moment you get to the site, where's the metal, and try to stay as far away from it as you can. That'll help with your operation as far as your RF interference is concerned. What you want to do when you're trying to consider where you are, what time of year it is, whether or not there's a storm system around, is you want to check your OEM flight parameters. If you buy an off-the-shelf drone, they're going to have recommended like top gust, wind gust, and also sustained winds that are okay for the drone to operate in. If you're using a DIY, that's a lot more complicated, and you're going to have to do some testing in a safe environment to figure out where it becomes too sketchy. Additionally, keep in mind too that if you're doing something high precision like mapping, wind can cause a lot of error. So you need to make sure you also communicate that to your client, that if they want top end information or top end performance, that they need to be sensitive that weather can stop you from operating. So you want to check your weather conditions 24 to 48 hours out using maybe like going online to like NOAA or Weather Underground or whatever. You need to allow for flexibility too. So you may be able to get a certain amount of flying in for a particular job if it's a complex project, but then you need to come back another day because maybe the light's different one day versus another, and it affects your data, or there's some kind of inhibitants such as people, a parade, or something like that that could cause you to not be able to fly that flight. And that's something that's super important to communicate with your clients, is you are trying to work around a bunch of different factors. And that doesn't mean that you can always guarantee that you can fly 100% everything you said you can fly on that specific day. So you want to check your conditions, and I can't over recommend having a handheld wind gauge with you. You can buy them on Amazon for like $40. It's good to have the weather information online, but having specifically the wind information of exactly where you are is absolutely essential, because they may say, oh, it's like 12-mile-an-hour winds. Okay, well, you may be out in an open field where in that particular spot, it gets gusty and it's 18. And that may be over your OEM parameters. And then through all those considerations, you want to use good judgment. If it seems like you're not going to be able to conduct your flight in a reasonably safe fashion, you need to take that into consideration above any and everything else. Because ultimately, if an incident occurs, if anything happens that is outside of what you wanted to happen, as the PIC, you are responsible, flat out. Your client is not responsible. The visual observer may not be responsible. The pilot in command is responsible. So you need to be able to communicate with your client that, if something doesn't work, I'm sorry, but I can't fly. I'm not going to put the aircraft up in the air. So required waiver information, a lot of different waiver requests are very different depending upon the nature of the actual mission, but information you absolutely should have before you begin the process is your longitude and latitude of the flight path. So specifically where you are, and that's having the longitude and latitude, not just, oh, I'm doing it at this address. Your maximum altitude you will be conducting, the maximum speed of the aircraft, how long you intend to be flying, when the flight is to be conducted, try to be as close with the estimation time, but also you can give yourself a little bit of a window to operate, and specifically make sure you have all of your registration information and any insurance information that you may have with the aircraft that could help prove to the FAA that you have left no safety stone unturned, because that will give them confidence. Keep in mind at the FAA, there's literally just a person reading your waiver. And if it's missing some information, they're going through tons of different waivers. They'll just throw it out. So typical personnel you're going to have is about a 2-man team. You can do it solo. As I said, a PIC can operate as your visual observer, but 2-man teams are really, really nice, especially if you're doing something like a building or an object that can obfuscate your visual line of sight. Having that communication with your visual observer so you can get just around that corner before you have to move and reposition. And additionally, and I'll cover this in a second, helping with bystanders that are around you can be very, very beneficial. If you're doing a very large project, especially when this collecting maybe 4K video or high resolution data that's multiple terabytes, what I have found in some of the projects that I have done is having somebody that's dedicated to managing that data on site. Because if you get a lot of data really fast and you're dumping it down to a laptop that you have on site, or keeping that data organized and knowing how it's presented, making sure it's backed up, can be absolutely essential, especially if you don't take that data off of, let's say, your SD card that you have up in your drone, and that drone goes down and you lose maybe the entire day's worth of data. That can severely put you back, versus if you are swapping SD cards, swapping data cards, downloading that data, maybe backing it up to the cloud to make sure that you don't ever take steps backwards, even if you have an incident. That is very important on large projects. So I recommend that you either have somebody assigned to that role or have an entire person dedicated to that role, depending upon the scale of the project that you're doing. So recommended equipment as well. As Troy said earlier, flying with one drone is super sketchy. If something goes wrong and you're out of commission because that drone went down or it's just not working for you, that's the worst thing, especially if you're in front of a client, because it'll show that you don't have your stuff together. So backup batteries, have way more batteries than you need, because you may not have an ability to charge. You may have an ability to charge, but maybe these batteries are slightly old and they don't perform quite as you expected. They were done in UAV, peer-to-peer communication with your visual observer. Walkie-talkies, you can use your cell phone, but walkie-talkies are extremely useful. So you're not on one side of a field yelling at your visual observer, do you see it? From the other side of the field, and it's not effective. PPE, such as personal safety equipment. So I use a vest and a hard hat when I'm doing certain projects to make sure that I'm highly visible, but also protected from potential head injuries. If you're in the construction project zone, you will most likely, almost every time, because of OSHA, have to have your hard hat on, right? You will be subject to the same safety PPE requirements that the construction workers would have. Landing pad and spacing cones. That's another thing that's super important. You want to be able to chunk out an entire zone specifically for your operation and make sure nobody goes into it. Because if you're using a large drone and there's wind gusts right there at the surface, it may sway. You may need to sway it. You may need to reorient a little bit, and it may not come down exactly where it's supposed to because of those considerations, maybe even low battery or interference. So you want to give yourself breathing room, and you don't want anybody walking right behind you, doing whatever they're going to do, and have that drone get close. First aid kit, sometimes you get nicked by a blade and it can be a very large laceration. So you want to be able to have the ability to stop any kind of bleeding right on site every time, right? Because we're dealing with machines that have giant spinning blades really close to one another, and we have to touch the drone. So accidents do happen. And again, as I said earlier, a handheld wind gauge is super useful to know that you're flying in OEM or acceptable conditions. So we're going to talk about a little bit about insurance. There's a lot of different policies, and the insurance companies have caught up in the last year or so to have certain policies available, but each company is going to have different requirements, and they're going to have different information that they're going to require for you. So when you're running your operation, the best thing you can have to start off is commercial general liability insurance. Okay, and that's going to protect the business owner against claims of liability if you break something, if somebody gets hurt, if they enter inside your little zone, your airspace bubble where you have your landing pad, and they get hurt, they can still sue you. Just because you put cones up doesn't necessarily protect you. You're going to want that commercial general liability insurance. There's also premise and operation insurance, and it does a similar thing, has a different rate too. And then products and completed operation that has asset liability insurance for your aircraft and equipment is expensive, and it's not widely available. DJI offers, I believe, a asset liability insurance, and that's if you crash, it'll help replace your drone. I believe there's some small companies out there, and maybe some of the large insurance companies that do have a pathway to get asset insurance, but it's nice, but it's difficult to get and it's expensive. So, if you're flying a $50,000 drone, totally worth it. If it's a $3,000 drone, it may not be cost effective. So asset liability is insurance for the aircraft. It can cover accidental avoidable downings. And as I said, it's typically very expensive. So your pre-flight planning. When you're positioning your visual observers, they act as your second pair of eyes, and you want to use your walkie-talkie. But they should be pre-positioned before the aircraft takes off. It's not like they're racing the aircraft. You want to make sure that you've looked at exactly the object or the area that you're trying to conduct your operation over, and make sure you have the most effective vantage point of all your personnel as humanly possible, so that you can communicate and have the best information possible to conduct your flight safely. So that's super important, such as having, if you're looking at a building, you may be at the flight pad, but your visual observer is off on the other side of the building looking at it. So in case you go around the corner, the aircraft goes around the corner, you can still contain or keep a visual line of sight. So this is my little diagram here about what you want to do when it comes to setting up your flight bubble area. As I said, you will attract attention, especially if you're in an urban environment. You'll get positive and negative attention. You'll get negative attention from people that think that their rights are being infringed upon, that don't necessarily have a good understanding of what their rights are and what your rights are as a pilot, and they may be hostile towards you. Or you may have, and this is a good thing, people that are super excited to see drone robotics being used right in their face, being used on something that they're familiar with. And you want to be there to help encourage them to maybe ask questions, but stay a safe distance away to leave that good mark in their memory about drones to help expand our industry. So this is another way where visual observers can be useful, but not necessarily if they're off in a whole nother area. They can be close to you and help you if you're looking down specifically, like you have a screen on your drone and you're making sure that your data is effective. Maybe you're a cameraman and you're focusing on the camera work and your visual observer spotting you as far as positioning. But they can also help be liaisons between you as the PIC, who should not be distracted in any way by onlookers or people who are hostile towards you, and them. Okay, so they will help if you need to come in for a landing and somebody crosses within your red box threshold here. They need to get them out. It's not the PIC that needs to get them out, because you should not be distracted from the flying. The visual observer or the helper, whoever you have, maybe a data integrity specialist, needs to be there to help make sure that nobody crosses within that threshold, because people are going to do what they want. I've been to plenty of events and flown plenty of situations where you have the cones, you have the landing pad, and somebody just steps right on it. So having that extra person there can really help, especially if you're in a more populated area. And then having a minimum of 5-foot radius around the end of the drone. So if you have a 1,000-millimeter drone, having 5 feet on top of that, on the ends of that, not just 5 feet total across, to make sure you have ample room. Now, granted, sometimes you'll be restricted as far as the space that you can use, but this is ideal. So your connection planning, that has to do with specifically how you're connecting to your drone. If you use a off-the-shelf drone, this is pretty much done for you. But if you're using a DIY drone, and let's say you're using a non-FCC ID transmitter and receiver, you may need to know whether or not you need to have shortwave radio licenses or not to access certain bands, such as 900 megahertz or something like that. So your power, your frequency, and antenna positioning. Having your antenna focused on your drone, especially if you're pushing yourself to as far as visual line of sight range can go, you want to make sure that your antennas are pointed at your drone. Because if you're hunched over and looking down while you're flying, or maybe turned around and the drone's behind you, first off, you're not keeping visual line of sight unless you have a visual observer. And secondly, you won't get as good a connection and you'll get delay, and it'll cause your drone to just not function quite as well. So your power amount is also determined upon whether you need shortwave radio. You can only go so high in power with your receiver, which increases the range, so on and so forth. Typically, drones are going to have 2.4 gigahertz or 5.8 gigahertz. 2.4 gigahertz is Bluetooth. 5.8 gigahertz is Wi-Fi connection. You can see that 5.8 is half of 2.4. So what you end up getting twice the range, well, relatively half, but twice the range, but double, or twice the data, but double half the range. That was difficult to say. So conducting your flight. You want to be in constant communication with your visual observer. As I've said a multitude of times now, unexpected obstacles are bound to occur. Unmanned aircraft, to be specific. Or you may be flying around a building and you're flying close to a balcony and somebody comes out on their balcony. It happens, okay? You need to make sure that you stay perfectly far away from them. Because if you're flying over that balcony and somebody comes out to their balcony, all of a sudden you're flying over people and you can't do that because you have a waiver. So you need to be aware of that and have as much of visualization of your surroundings as possible. Almost all flight controllers, whether it be DIY or other drones, have a return to home feature. Every time you fly, absolutely set this up. You can lose connection, you can have low battery, you can have your controller die. You can have so many different things that can happen. If you have an automatic button or even just automatic feature that brings that drone back to where it's supposed to be safely, whether it loses connection or what have you, that will save your butt way ton of times. Because otherwise, that drone may crash or that drone may be stuck unconnected, idle up in the air, and you can't get back connected to it. But a lot of these drones will be able to come back and return to home base, provided they have a GPS. And then watching for other aircraft. Again, you have to yield manned aircraft. Even if you're out in the middle of a field, they can still be at like 300 feet, and you got to get out of the way. So asset care. You want to always track, as Sharon mentioned earlier, employers and clients are going to want to see your flight logs and have you validate your experience so they can feel comfortable they're spending money with somebody who knows what they're doing. Super important. I would always recommend tracking your flight logs. There's a number of websites out there. There's several there's one website, it's called like droneflightlogs.com, that you can actually, for most brands of drones, download your flight data and it populates an extremely thorough report. And you can print it, save as PDF, or you can have your account and just have it there. But it's specifically designed for that. And now we're going to talk about battery cycling. Lithium polymer batteries, which are what you're going to see in 99% of your drones, they have a memory to them and they have a resistance. You can't just continue to cycle them, and a cycle is charging and discharging them and then charging them back up again. You cannot just keep running. They eventually go bad. You consume batteries and they will stop holding quite the same voltage. They have memory to them. You can judge that memory, you can judge that ability to hold voltage by its resistance. Now, with a lot of off-the-shelf drone batteries, such as DJI batteries that have a PCB board on top of them that regulate them and whatnot, you can't really do this test without taking it apart, or at least I don't know how to do it. I'm sure somebody with more technical wizardry can figure this out. But if you're using simple batteries for a DIY drone, and you have a balance charger, look at the resistance when you're charging your battery. If it's 1 or 2 or 5 or what have you milliohms, which is the unit that they'll use, you're fine. Once you get to like 30 milliohms, now you're going to start seeing performance issues, and the battery that you thought would be able to make a flight doesn't. And now that's changed your flight planning. Additionally, when you're looking at a balance charger and your batteries have a different milliohm resistance or a different voltage across each cell, then you know something is wrong with your battery and you should not use it. If you've got, out of a 6-cell battery, 5 cells are 3.9 volts and you have 1 cell that's like 2.4, okay, something's wrong with that cell and you need to not use that battery. So that's something really important to consider. So battery maintenance, again, LiPo batteries, for people that aren't familiar with the ins and outs of specific lithium polymer batteries, they balance between 4.2 volts and 3.8 volts. Your drone battery should not go below 3.8 volts. That's not good for it. And it should not really go above 4.2 volts. Some people overcharge their batteries to 4.35, but they know they're damaging their battery, but they're doing it to get more performance because batteries are consumed, so they're okay with it. You should not leave your LiPo batteries in storage charged. There is a specific storage mode, which is typically, and there's a lot of debate about this, but typically like 3.75 volts, just a little bit below what is technically empty in the drone, and this keeps them from having too much energy and possibly combusting while they're in storage because you've let the energy out of them. LiPo batteries don't work good when they're cold. If you're going out to a cold environment, maybe it's snowing, maybe there's this deep wind chill, warm your batteries up. You know, you can put them in your jacket pocket if you're out on site and you're walking around, and they'll warm them up. But like, make sure they're not ice cold. You know, you may store them in an area that's very cold, but make sure you warm them up to at least room temperature before you start using them to get the optimal performance. And again, the battery memory, you will consume these batteries over time. I would highly recommend on every battery that you get, I take a little bit of painter's tape, put it right on the battery, and every time I cycle it, I put a dash every single time. And about 30 or 40, or when I start to see the resistance get too high, I dispose of it, right? And so you'll know which batteries have been used a lot, used a little. It's super important. I also would recommend tracking that in your logs. If you have a serial number or an ID system with your batteries, be like, I used this battery, and this battery for a cycle from this voltage to this voltage, use this many milliamps of it. That's always really good information to help make sure that you're getting everything you need out of your batteries and create consistency with your performance. So here's another thing that's not usually talked about, but this is, if you're flying a lot, this could be important. Bearing maintenance. For the most part, drones are a solid state device. They don't have a whole ton of moving parts, and specifically they have one really important moving part, and that is the motors. And the motors are going to have bearings, and the bearings do go bad after a while. For anybody that's used any racing drones before, bearings go bad all the time, mainly because of physical contact and crashes, but even over time, your bearings will wear out. The main way you can tell is the drone should fly, except for the buzzing noise of the actual propellers, the drone should fly relatively quiet. If you hear a small grinding noise or like a tone, that could be an indicator that your bearings are damaged, wearing out, going bad. Those are always really good idea to maintain those. There's a bunch of different bearing websites. You can have some extra bearings on deck, because provided that your drone's going to have all the same motors in that particular drone. So you'll have a bunch of bearings to change them out, or you can even decide to change them out regularly to make sure that you're keeping up with your maintenance. And I also recommend that for each aircraft you have a go kit for that drone. Small things that you need to repair, like Loctite, zip ties, bearings, as I mentioned, hot glue, adhesives, Velcro, especially if you want to use industrial Velcro, because that stuff's awesome. But have like a little, like, I have a Husky box I use for every single one of my drones that has stuff specifically for that particular aircraft, even if I have more than one, because stuff will break, stuff will vibrate out. You know, having stuff like liquid electrical tape too is also super important that you want to have on site, because if you get put down by something small and that stops your operation, okay, well, that just needed a zip tie, but what if you're in the middle of nowhere? Can't really get a zip tie in the middle of nowhere sometimes. So that's pretty much all I got for you guys. Let's see if there's any questions.
I think one of the questions, Evan, is, you know, when you posted the site on the Texas rules and regulations, where was your source? And just reference that, but also if you're out of a different state or country, where would you look for specific rules and regulations?
So I found those by searching for them on Google, and it sent me to the Texas, state law website, and I just found it on there. And I can go back to it real fast.
Not only that, but I want to mention to everyone, with the North Central Texas of governments, we actually have a legal department, and they stay closely watch the proposals and the rules and regulations. So if for some reason you're not that familiar with it, or you're not getting on the site, or you don't understand it, that's a great resource to reach out to them and ask them the questions. Well, what does this really mean? And has this been in effect, or is it just a proposal? And what's where is it in the process of being approved? And also, I think it's really important for everyone everyone to be involved in the rules and regulations. Don't just sit and wait for a rule to come along. If you're not happy with the rule that they're proposing, you know, you have a voice, and it's time to speak out now before they actually make it in law.
Yeah, it's a great point. There's always a comment period on with the remote ID that just got passed. There was a very long comment period where you could have gone to the FAA and submitted your comments, whether you're in favor, for it, against it, or whether you had any suggestions for tweaks. And we've spoken with a number of FAA officials that are specifically involved with this. They do read them. They will listen to you. If you have a good idea, they will pay attention to it. Like, straight up, these are real people. This is not super removed from the operators, because they want to help create the most functional industry that they can. So here's the Texas laws and regulations. Each state's going to have specific things that they put into law that are on top of the federal restrictions, because there may be things that are okay federally, but just not okay in that particular state. Mm-hmm. And so I would encourage you, there's a lot of influencers out there that have already gone through this, or maybe lawyers that have gone through this and picked out some of the best ones for your particular state. So a quick Google search will typically get you at least a head start. And then from there, you can actually, you know, query your state's capital website to find specifically the laws and download the regulations so that you have a good copy of that.
Right, that's a good point. And then you also mentioned about the bearings and changing them out. Is there a good YouTube that you can go to understand how to change them out? If you're not technically mechanically inclined, is there a great resource for how to changing bearings? I know Drone Plus, one of our sponsors, is also their repair shops, so you can always go there. But are you familiar with any YouTubing for the changing out the bearings?
The best place you can go, honestly, is if you're interested in racing drones, because you'll notice actually a lot of the similar motors that people use in some of the larger racing drones may be used in some of the larger commercial drones. They're pretty much the same thing sometimes. And there is, because they're all DIY and they're all maintained and bearings go out all the time in that sort of format, you'll find a lot of influencers specifically. If you type in your motor and bearing change on YouTube, you will find a video, I promise. So, you know, that's that, but it'll typically be in the context of racing drones.
You've covered a lot, and I really appreciate it. This was a great presentation. Is there any real takeaway that if you were going to emphasize anything, Evan, what would it be?
Planning. Plan your flight and fly your plan, but also be flexible.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, you know, in the very beginning, our presenter was Troy Willman about, you know, be prepared to make mistakes, because everyone, some way, being prepared, you can be prepared, but there's always going to be, you know, something that goes wrong, and having that preparation and experience does help so that you can react appropriately. So, you know, you're not hurting somebody, or you're not hurting your drone. Again, I mean, if you need to bring it down before, you know, it's a lot easier to take care of something when it's on the ground than it is in the air. That's for sure. I don't see any other major questions. I know that I really want to emphasize how important it is that you fill out the survey. It is now on chat. There's a link. Just, you know, log into that, because when we are planning these workshops, and again, they're free, and that's one of the most fantastic things, to have all these wonderful presenters and resources out there. That's not going to cost you anything. It just costs you some time, but I promise you it's going to be worthwhile. Please fill out the survey so we know exactly what you want. And if there's any ideas or any criticisms, we take both, trust me, please share those, because that way we can improve again and again. We're having these workshops once a month. So next month is going to be about remote ID and ops over people. There are some changes, so that's really important that you guys are aware of what those changes are. It's going to be a really good one. And please share this information. Know that we're going to be, again, having it the first Saturday of next month. So we'll be sending anyone that's participated or is a viewer now, we will personally send you an email for next month's seminar or workshop. But again, please fill out that information so that we know what's going on. Okay, let me look and see if there's any other questions. Okay, let's see. I didn't pay attention to the time zone and are bummed I missed this. Don't worry about that, Angela, because we are recording this. So you can go back on our website and listen to the whole session again. And we are going to be sharing the information. So anyone that's attended, if you're wanting specific slides or information, we can share those with you too. So you don't have to memorize everything. It's great. And it's www.northtexasuas.com. And that is on the chat right now. Please go ahead and utilize this. And again, if you think there's somebody that you know of that would benefit from these, they can watch the past seminars, and then we're going to be having some great subjects in the next month, but month by month we'll be offering these. So I want to thank you again. Is there any other questions? I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to sorry, I'm just reading some of these. Is there any other questions that maybe I've missed? Go ahead and put them into the comments. I think, what about for Sharon? Does anyone have any questions on what Sharon covered? I mean, it was real helpful to know that there are opportunities, there are jobs, and there's resources out there, you guys. So like, if you don't want to start your own business, but you want to get into the industry, there's a lot of companies that are looking for skilled or non-skilled pilots, and they're going to teach you what they need to know for that specific job. So it's really important to utilize it. And plus that $100 just to put your resume on that Career Connect, that's a great opportunity. We're just trying to encourage everyone to be involved. So I don't see any, let's see, any other questions? I say thank you. Would there be any other student opportunities you may recommend? Student opportunities, are you referring to like being a internship? I know that we're working on some internships within the North Texas Central Council of Governments, the UAS. I know that we're reaching out to companies and asking for opportunities that we can have our students be involved as an intern. So we'll be looking out for that. But you know, those are the things, again, questions that you can ask AUVSI or Women in Drones. I know that Women in Drones, the Career Connect, there are some opportunities to be an intern or a student. So there's other companies or actually organizations like AUVSI that have an actual, it's called top certification, and they actually will do some training so that you guys can warm up your skill set, so that, hey, if a company is looking for a particular operator and you have top certification, that might put you in the forefront of, or the line, front of the line to being hired, because you're saying, hey, I've gone out of my way and I made sure that I have some certifications so that I'm not just handing you and, hey, I'm a 107, but I'm a 107 with, again, some experience and some more education. So that's really important. And I'm just looking at anything else. Look and see. Oh, no, before you fly. So our next workshop for February, our tickets are actually available already on Eventbrite. So thank you for telling us that, Kenny. And again, if you have any other questions, you feel free to contact us through our website and we can answer questions, or at least direct you to somebody that is familiar with that particular question. So that's great. And I think that we have covered everything else. Look for the resources, for the links that we had mentioned. And if there is anything else, you can reach out to me or to, again, Ernest Huffman, who is in charge of the UAS Integration and Safety and Integration Committee. He is, we are going to have our next meeting with the UAS Safety and Integration end of this month. If you want to be involved, you have to be invited by Ernest Huffman from the Texas Council of Governments. But it is a fabulous, fabulous committee with industry. We're talking about educators. We're talking about lead industry like Bell Flight and Uber and everything like that, that are a part of this committee. We do also break down to working committees. So I lead the Public Awareness Education Committee, and then there's a legislation committee, and then there's a training committee and integration. So those four workshops is great because we are looking for volunteers. So if you're interested in being a part of that, again, contact us and we would love to have your input. So if there's not any other questions, I want to again thank Troy and Sharon and Evan for being, again, very informative and having a lot of information, again, within 2 hours. If you guys think that this is too short, we can always lengthen it. If you think that we haven't covered a certain subject or really directed some of the questions that you asked, please reach out through the survey and we'll be happy to respond and improve for next workshop. So again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Bye.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Hmm.
Thank you.